The air hung heavy with the scent of honeysuckle as the sun set over Harmony Creek, casting long shadows across the town's manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges. It was the kind of place where front doors were left unlocked and children rode their bikes home alone, a place where the biggest worry was whether Mrs. Peabody's prize-winning begonias would bloom in time for the summer show. So when Sheriff Brody Nelson got the call about an apparent cardiac arrest at the parsonage, he assumed it was just another one of those damn hot days getting to the old folks. "I'm sorry, Sheriff," she whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Then he bent down beside her and said, "Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to let me in the house. The doctor wants to do a full autopsy. Caleb was supposed to come out here with me tonight." The windows were open, letting in the cloying honeysuckle smell and the buzz of evening cicadas. It was too warm for a fire, but the fireplace was going, its logs banked but still glowing. Nelson's pulse quickened. Who had written that? And what did they mean? He looked up as footsteps approached. Mary Beth stood in the doorway, her face pale. "Sheriff," she began, her voice tight, "you don't really believe, do you?" A book lay open on the coffee table, its pages filled with neat spidery handwriting. Nelson recognized it as the pastor's journal. He picked it up and flipped through the brittle pages. There was nothing remarkable until he saw the last entry, dated the night before. "We were gonna watch the sunset and pray, but he never came. Caleb had a heart attack. I felt his pulse. It was gone when I touched him. You can ask anyone in town. I need to ask you some questions about these phone calls." She was right. He didn't know of a single person in Harmony Creek who had a bad word to say about the pastor. Not one. He'd seen the way she dotted on him, how she teased him mercilessly and defended him fiercely. He discovered that Mary Beth had taken out a large life insurance policy on her husband, and that she'd cashed in a substantial amount of his sermons, which he'd saved for retirement. He also learned that the calls from the unknown numbers had started shortly after Caleb had become pastor of Harmony Creek. And now it all made sense. But now he couldn't help but wonder if she was capable of killing him. It was a woman who introduced herself as Mary Ann, the same name signed on the condolence card. Not for the bruises on the pastor's body, not for the fear in his final journal entry, not for the fact that someone had tried to cover up the crime. The perfect town, the perfect pastor, the perfect wife, all of it was just an illusion, a lie spun to perfection. All it took was one thread of suspicion to unravel it all. Turns out she was Caleb Holt's mistress, and once Nelson confronted her, she spilled the beans. She told him about the affair, about how she and Caleb had planned to run away together, and about how Mary Beth had been blackmailing her husband for money. She said she'd called him dozens of times, but he'd never answered. She was furious, but she swore she didn't kill him. "But I wish you'd respect his privacy and mine." She admitted to everything, to the affair, to the blackmail, to hating her husband. "He was a fraud," she cried. "He pretended to be a man of God, but he was a liar, a cheat, a hypocrite. I wanted to punish him, but I never wanted him dead." And yet the autopsy report told a different story. It showed signs of struggle, defensive wounds, even a contusion that could have been caused by a blunt force. She looked up at him, startled, then quickly composed herself. "Sheriff, what are you doing here? Don't you think this is a bit insensitive?" Her voice shook with faint indignation. "Why did you take out a life insurance on him if you hated him so much? The pastor hadn't died of a heart attack. Someone had bludgeoned him and then propped him up by the fireplace. They'll tell you he was the kindest, most honest man they ever knew." Then he noticed something strange. Nearly every entry mentioned a late-night phone call from an unknown number. At first, there had been just one call a week, then 2, then 5. And the pastor's final entry mentioned no less than 8 of them. Who was calling and why? Nelson tracked down the phone company and got a list of the numbers, each one disconnected or out of service. But one of them was still active, and it was registered to none other than Mary Beth Holt. He wouldn't hurt a fly, much less commit fraud or take bribes. Why would anyone want him dead? They're still angry about the zoning commission's decision. But I convinced them to trust the process, prayed with them, and reminded them that God has a plan even when our plans fail. God is good all the time. Nelson frowned. He knew the names on the list. They were local developers who wanted to build a low-income housing complex near the golf course. The zoning commission had denied their request, and Nelson knew they were unhappy, but he'd never imagined they'd resort to something like murder. And besides, he thought, what motive would they have to kill the pastor? I waited and waited, and then I went in to check on him, but he was already gone. His heart just gave out, I guess, but this wasn't any ordinary house call. It was the pastor's house, and Pastor Caleb Holt had missed Sunday service for the first time in 25 years. He'd known her since she'd been a girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin, and he still remembered the day she'd marched up to him while he was booking someone in, demanding to know why they hadn't called her about her husband's late-night escapades. Why wouldn't she want the doctor to examine her husband's body? After all, he was supposed to have died of a heart attack. Mrs. Holt, out of respect for the family, I'll make it as quick as possible, Nelson lied, knowing full well Dr. Peterson would take his sweet time. She'd looked like a Disney princess with her blonde braids and blue eyes, except that her nostrils flared and her jaw clenched the way a pit bull did when she gotten riled up. He'd been 19 and she'd been 13 then. He awkwardly stammered something about not wanting to get her involved, and had been surprised when she smacked him upside the head with a copy of Archie Comics. That was Mary Beth Holt for you, always ready to defend her own, even if it meant socking a cop. For most of Harmony Creek, that was longer than they'd known him not to be there. A beacon of faith and stability like the town's water tower. The news of his passing hit them hard, so hard that during the brief time between his death and his funeral barely anyone noticed anything amiss, not even when a bouquet of lilies arrived at the house with a card simply reading sorry for your loss. It was signed by someone called Mary Ann, but no one in Harmony Creek knew a Mary Ann, which was weird because everyone knew Pastor Holt's wife, Mary Beth. She was sitting on the porch swing when Sheriff Nelson arrived, and now here she was, looking like a fallen angel in black with a Bible in her lap, tears on her cheeks and a haunted look in her eyes. Nelson put a comforting hand on her shoulder, the gesture automatic, her head snapped up, her eyes flashing. He's already gone, Sheriff. What more do you want? He could see the pain in her eyes, but something about her reaction didn't sit right. He walked around the house while Mary Beth unlocked the door. Flew into town today, it read. Met with Mark Davis and Louis Bramble about the new development. Then he saw it. Underneath the entry, a postscript scrawled in a different hand. Don't trust them. They won't stop. Mark especially. Believe what? That Caleb was murdered? Well, Nelson said carefully. We don't know that yet, but we will once Dr. Peterson finishes. There's no need for an autopsy. Sheriff, she said, stepping closer. Nelson opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. As the investigation dragged on, Nelson found himself focusing on the pastor's journal, rereading the entries and poring over the cryptic annotations. He paid her a visit, interrupting her grief counseling session. It's my job to follow up on every lead, Mrs. Holt. Caleb had his reasons for not telling me who was calling. It was his secret and his burden to bear. Of course, Nelson said softly, though he wasn't buying it. He could tell Mary Beth was hiding something. He knew she loved her husband. As the weeks passed, Nelson's suspicions grew. The police finally caught up with one of the people on the list. When Nelson relayed this information to the others, Mary Beth broke down. Nelson wasn't buying it. I just wanted to be able to leave town without him finding me, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. He believed her, but it wasn't enough. In the end, they never caught the killer. The case went cold, leaving Harmony Creek and Sheriff Nelson shaken and disillusioned.